At just 28 years old, Charlie Javice convinced America's largest bank to hand her $175 million for a company built on fabricated data, fake users, and outright lies. JPMorgan Chase, a financial behemoth with armies of lawyers, analysts, and due diligence teams, never saw it coming. They thought they were buying access to 4.25 million college students desperate for financial aid. Instead, they purchased a digital mirage. Fewer than 300,000 real users, padded with millions of synthetic identities, created by a data scientist paid just $18,000. This wasn't a simple exaggeration or optimistic marketing. This was calculated fraud, fake emails, manufactured student records, and doctored spreadsheets presented as truth during the most important business transaction of Javice's life. And for over a year, she almost got away with it. But when the illusion finally cracked, it revealed one of the most brazen fintech frauds in American history. This is the story of how a Forbes 30 under 30 entrepreneur became a federal convict, and what her downfall teaches us about the dangerous intersection of ambition, deception, and due diligence failures. If this story already has you hooked, please hit that like button right now and subscribe to the Sleeping Economist channel. Our mission is to uncover the financial events that shaped our world while most people weren't paying attention, the hidden stories behind the headlines you might have missed. From Wharton to Wall Street, darling, Charlie Javice didn't come from nowhere. She was born into privilege, attended the prestigious French-American School of New York, and accelerated through the Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania, one of the most elite business programs in America, graduating in just 3 years with degrees in finance and legal studies. By age 24 in 2016, she launched Frank, a fintech startup with an appealing premise, simplifying the notoriously complicated free application for federal student aid, known as FAFSA. The FAFSA form is a bureaucratic nightmare, over 100 questions about family finances, tax returns, and asset holdings. For millions of American families, it's the gateway to college affordability. Yet it's so confusing that many eligible students never complete it, leaving billions in federal aid unclaimed each year. Javice positioned Frank as the solution, a streamlined platform promising fast FAFSA with one-click applications. It sounded revolutionary. It sounded necessary. And in the world of Silicon Valley-style disruption, it sounded fundable. Javice knew how to market herself. She cultivated an image as a passionate advocate for students drowning in debt, speaking at conferences about democratizing access to education. By 2019, Forbes named her to their prestigious 30 under 30 finance list. She appeared on panels, gave interviews, and positioned herself as the next generation of financial innovators. The media called her the Amazon for student loans. Investors took notice. She raised capital from venture firms, built a small team, and expanded Frank's operations. But here's what nobody knew at the time. Beneath the polished pitch decks and media appearances, Frank was struggling to gain real traction. The platform worked. Technically, students could use it to help with their FAFSA applications, but the user base wasn't growing at the explosive rate Javice claimed publicly. The gap between reality and narrative was widening, and when major financial institutions started showing interest in acquiring Frank, that gap became a problem Javice decided to solve not by building genuine growth, but by manufacturing fake evidence of success. By 2021, Frank had approximately 300,000 legitimate users, a respectable number for a niche fintech startup, but nowhere near the millions Javice would soon claim. JPMorgan Chase, meanwhile, was hunting for opportunities to connect with younger customers. The bank's executives saw college students as a crucial demographic, future high earners who'd need mortgages, investment accounts, and credit products for decades. Frank appeared to offer instant access to millions of these coveted young consumers. The setup was complete. JP Morgan wanted youth market access. Javice wanted a massive payday. The only obstacle between them was the truth, and Javice had decided the truth was negotiable. The $18,000 fake database in the summer of 2021, JPMorgan Chase's acquisition team reached out to Charlie Javice with serious interest. For a 28-year-old entrepreneur, this was the ultimate validation. The biggest bank in America wanted to buy her company. But validation came with verification. JPMorgan wasn't going to write a 9-figure check without conducting due diligence. And that meant one critical demand: prove you actually have the users you claim. Javice told JPMorgan that Frank had over 4.25 million user students who had created accounts and used the platform for financial aid applications. She presented spreadsheets, growth charts, and projections showing Frank as a dominant player in the student finance space. The bank's acquisition team was intrigued but cautious. They wanted to verify this user data independently. Specifically, they wanted to run Frank's customer list through a third-party data validation company called Axiom, which could confirm whether these millions of users were real people with valid information. This is where the scheme began to take shape. Javice didn't have 4 million users. She had roughly 300,000. If she provided the real data to JPMorgan, the deal would collapse instantly. She faced a choice: admit the truth and walk away from generational wealth, or double down and fabricate evidence. She chose fabrication. Javice turned to her director of engineering, Olivier Amar, who became her co-conspirator in the fraud. Together, they devised a plan to create a synthetic user database, millions of fake student accounts that would appear legitimate enough to pass JPMorgan's verification process. But neither Javice nor Amar had the technical expertise to generate such a massive dataset convincingly. They needed help. Enter the data science professor, a contact from Javice's network, whom she approached with an extraordinary request. She asked him to take Frank's real user base of roughly 300,000 accounts and algorithmically generate millions of additional fake users, complete with plausible names, email addresses, birth dates, and demographic information. According to federal prosecutors, Javice made it explicitly clear that this data would be synthetic, fabricated, and used to mislead JPMorgan during the acquisition process. The professor agreed and quoted $18,000 for the work. Think about that number for a moment. $18,000. That's what it costs to fabricate the fake evidence that would secure a $175 million acquisition. The return on investment was staggering and completely illegal. The professor worked quickly, using algorithmic methods to create 4.265 million synthetic student accounts. Email exchanges later obtained by prosecutors showed both parties knew exactly what they were doing. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't aggressive marketing. This was a deliberate conspiracy to defraud one of the world's most powerful financial institutions. The data was delivered. The trap was set. And JPMorgan was about to walk right into it. When JPMorgan discovered the truth, by late summer 2021, Charlie Javice had her fraudulent database ready. She provided the fabricated list of 4.265 million users to JPMorgan Chase for validation through Axiom. The synthetic data looked legitimate enough. On the surface, real-sounding names, properly formatted email addresses, demographic diversity that matched college-age populations. JPMorgan's team reviewed the data and critically moved forward with the acquisition. In September 2021, the deal closed. JPMorgan Chase acquired Frank for $175 million. Charlie Javice became an overnight multimillionaire. She received cash, stock, and bonuses totaling over $22 million personally, and JPMorgan hired her as a managing director with a prestigious role overseeing student financial services. Media coverage was glowing. Industry insiders called it a smart move by JPMorgan to capture the youth market. Javice celebrated publicly, positioning herself as a successful entrepreneur who'd built something valuable and sold it to a financial giant. Everything appeared perfect. But within months, cracks began to show. JPMorgan's integration team started working to merge Frank's platform into the bank's existing systems and marketing strategies. They wanted to leverage that massive 4 million-plus user base, immediately sending promotional emails, offering banking products, and converting Frank users into JPMorgan customers. This is where the fraud began to unravel. When JPMorgan attempted to email Frank's supposed millions of users, something strange happened. The engagement rates were disastrously low. Emails bounced back. Accounts appeared inactive. The response rates didn't match what you'd expect from a database of millions of engaged young customers. Bank executives grew suspicious. They started digging deeper, requesting more detailed information about user activity, account creation dates, and engagement metrics. In December 2021, just 3 months after the acquisition closed, JPMorgan confronted Javice directly. They asked her to provide evidence supporting the 4.25 million user claim. They wanted login records, transaction histories, and server data that would corroborate the numbers she'd presented during due diligence. Javice couldn't provide it because it didn't exist. The company she'd sold was fundamentally a fraud. By early 2022, JPMorgan's legal team had seen enough. Internal investigators discovered the fake database, traced the $18,000 payment to the data science professor, and uncovered email communications that proved Javice and Amar had knowingly fabricated the user numbers. The bank had been scammed, and not by a sophisticated criminal organization, but by a 28-year-old entrepreneur they'd hired as an executive and a small team who'd bet everything on a lie. The breaking point had arrived. JPMorgan filed a civil lawsuit against Javice in December 2022, alleging fraud and seeking damages. The story exploded into public view, and federal prosecutors immediately took interest. From Forbes cover to federal courtroom, when JPMorgan Chase's lawsuit became public in December 2022, the story went viral. The narrative had everything. A young, celebrated female founder, a Forbes 30 under 30 honoree, a massive fraud, and one of the world's biggest banks as the victim. Media outlets scrambled to cover the scandal. Headlines asked how this could happen. How could JPMorgan, an institution with seemingly unlimited resources, be fooled by fabricated spreadsheets and fake email addresses? Charlie Javice initially fought back. Her legal team issued statements claiming JPMorgan had failed to conduct proper due diligence and was now trying to shift blame for a bad acquisition decision. She argued the bank had become greedy, rushed the deal without adequate verification, and was now scapegoating her for their own mistakes. It was a bold defense strategy. Admit nothing, attack the accuser, and frame herself as a victim of corporate overreach. But the evidence against her was overwhelming. Prosecutors had the emails between Javice and a data science professor discussing the fabricated database. They had payment records showing the $18,000 transaction. They had testimony from the professor himself, who cooperated with investigators. They had internal JPMorgan communications showing the bank's legitimate due diligence requests and Javice's fraudulent responses. Most damningly, they had the simple mathematical truth. Frank had fewer than 300,000 real users, not the 4.25 million Javice had claimed. On April 4, 2023, federal prosecutors charged Charlie Javice and Olivier Amar with 4 counts: securities fraud, wire fraud, bank fraud, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Each charge carried a maximum sentence of 30 years in prison. The U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York, famous for prosecuting white-collar crime, made it clear this case would be pursued aggressively. The message was unmistakable. No matter how young, how accomplished, or how well-connected you are, fraud has consequences. The fallout extended beyond criminal charges. Javice's reputation was destroyed overnight. Her Forbes 30 under 30 honor became a symbol of hype-driven startup culture gone wrong, mentioned alongside other disgraced young entrepreneurs like Elizabeth Holmes and Sam Bankman-Fried. Investors who'd backed Frank early felt betrayed. Students who'd actually used the platform questioned whether their personal financial information had been handled responsibly. And JPMorgan shut down Frank entirely, writing off the entire $175 million investment as a loss. For Olivier Amar, the consequences were equally severe. As Javice's co-conspirator, he faced the same charges and the same potential decades in prison. The scheme that had seemed so clever during those summer months of 2021, just $18,000 to manufacture a massive fake user base, now looked catastrophic. Both defendants pleaded not guilty and prepared for trial, but the evidence against them was damning. Guilty on all counts, 7 years in prison. The trial of Charlie Javice and Olivier Amar began in early 2025 and lasted 6 weeks. Federal prosecutors presented a mountain of evidence: emails, financial records, expert testimony about the fabricated database, and testimony from JPMorgan executives who described how they'd been deceived. The defense argued JPMorgan had been negligent in its due diligence, suggesting the bank should have caught the fraud earlier. They painted Javice as an ambitious entrepreneur who'd made mistakes but not criminal ones, claiming the user number discrepancies were misunderstandings rather than intentional fraud. The jury didn't buy it. On March 28, 2025, after deliberating, they returned guilty verdicts on all 4 counts against both Javice and Amar. The courtroom was packed with reporters, and the verdict made immediate headlines. A young founder who'd once been celebrated as a visionary was now a convicted felon facing serious prison time. Sentencing came on September 29, 2025. Judge Alvin Hellerstein, known for his no-nonsense approach to white-collar crime, sentenced Charlie Javice to 85 months in federal prison, just over 7 years. He also ordered her to forfeit over $22 million in ill-gotten gains from the fraudulent sale and her subsequent employment at JPMorgan. Additionally, she was ordered to pay $287 million in restitution jointly with Amar, though recovering that amount would prove virtually impossible. In his sentencing remarks, Judge Hellerstein was blunt. He acknowledged JPMorgan's due diligence failures, even calling some of the bank's decisions stupid, but he emphasized that stupidity by a victim doesn't excuse fraud by a perpetrator. She hired a data scientist to create fake data to back up her lies, the judge stated, making clear that Javice's actions were calculated, deliberate, and deserving of significant punishment. Olivier Amar was sentenced separately on November 5, 2025, receiving 68 months, nearly 6 years in federal prison. Both defendants indicated they would appeal, but legal experts considered their chances slim given the overwhelming evidence of guilt. The aftermath extended beyond criminal convictions. JPMorgan pursued civil remedies, attempting to recover its losses and legal fees. In a bizarre twist, the bank had been required under the terms of the original acquisition agreement to pay for Javice's legal defense, leading to millions more in expenses as she fought the charges. For the broader fintech industry, the Frank case became a cautionary tale. Investors and acquirers began scrutinizing user metrics more carefully, demanding third-party verification of key data before closing deals. Regulatory bodies examined whether existing fraud detection systems were adequate for the fast-moving startup world. And business schools added the case to their curricula as an example of ethical failure, asking students, at what point does aggressive entrepreneurship cross the line into criminal fraud? The damage was done, the conviction secured, and Charlie Javice, once a rising star, was headed to federal prison. What Charlie Javice teaches us about fraud: the Frank fraud isn't just a story about one person's bad decisions. It's a story about systemic failures that allowed those decisions to nearly succeed. First, let's talk about due diligence, or in JPMorgan's case, the lack of it. The bank had roughly 1 month during summer 2021 to verify Frank's claims before closing a $175 million acquisition. 1 month to validate 4 million users, review business metrics, and confirm the company was what it claimed to be. That's shockingly inadequate for a deal of that magnitude. Yes, JPMorgan requested data. Yes, they involved third-party validators like Axiom. But they never demanded server logs, login analytics, or the kind of forensic verification that would have immediately exposed the fraud. Why? Because they were in a hurry. They wanted access to young consumers before a competitor beat them to it. Greed and FOMO fear of missing out created shortcuts in a process that should never have shortcuts. Second, Charlie Javice's story reveals the dark side of fake it till you make it startup culture. In Silicon Valley and the broader tech world, there's often a fine line between visionary optimism and outright lying. Founders are encouraged to be bold, to project confidence, to sell the dream before it's fully real. But Javice didn't just exaggerate growth projections or spin user engagement metrics favorably. She manufactured millions of fake users with the explicit intention of deceiving a buyer. That's not entrepreneurial hustle. That's fraud. And the distinction matters enormously. Third, this case demonstrates the dangers of credential worship. Javice graduated from Wharton in 3 years. She made Forbes 30 under 30. She spoke at conferences and won awards. Those credentials created a halo effect that made investors, journalists, and even JPMorgan executives less skeptical than they should have been. So what's the practical takeaway? Whether you're investing money, considering a job offer, or evaluating any too good to be true opportunity, demand proof, not testimonials, not media coverage, not credentials, proof, independently verifiable evidence that claims match reality. Ask hard questions. Be willing to walk away. And remember, if someone gets defensive when you ask for verification, that defensiveness itself is a red flag. Charlie Javice is now in federal prison, her reputation destroyed, her wealth forfeited. JPMorgan lost $175 million. The students who used Frank lost their platform. Everyone involved paid a price for shortcuts, lies, and inadequate scrutiny. If stories like this, where we uncover the economic events that shaped our world while most people weren't paying attention, fascinate you, please like this video and subscribe to the channel, because we're just getting started with these financial, educational mysteries. Thanks for watching.